there are moments when you first start using the tool where you'll hit these pockets of tissue. Like for me, this is what has happened. I've had almost blackouts. Like my vision goes a little gray because I'm hitting like a pain point and my nervous system has responded. And it's that feeling like if you get up too fast, the experience is so euphoric, unbelievably so. Like when I found my trigger point on this right bicep and I first crimped it on this arm, I wept, man. Like I cried because I just said to myself, have I been carrying my whole body right here?
Thanks everybody for watching the Quality Values podcast. I love doing this show. Please like and subscribe. It makes a big difference for me. Also, check out the body lever. It's a device to massage yourself. It's basically like a giant pair of nunchucks, but you can use it to lever on your own tissues. Each stick is about 30 inches tall, and there's a 4-inch rope in the middle, and it's got some grooves so you can really work through the knots. Super cool device. Check it out. If you enjoyed this episode with Steve and it's something you want to get for yourself, go to the link below. You'll get that 15% discount. Thank you guys for watching. All right into it. Welcome, Steve, to the Quality Values podcast. I've been looking forward to this episode for a while. I followed you on Instagram. I've got a fitness device of my own, and I've been kind of seeking information and like an understanding of the process from other people who have fitness devices. And you've got a really cool one. It's called the Body Lever. You can see it in your background. For anyone who's listening on audio, this background is sweet. Steve has like a plywood kind of workshop wall behind him with a big whiteboard, all these kind of math symbols on it. There's some body lever branded things, and then right behind his shoulder, there's his devices, which are they kind of look like nunchucks. That was the first thing I thought when I saw them. I'm a big nunchucks guy. I have a pair I like to play with, but they're bigger and they've got some rounded parts, and we'll get into it. But you can use them for self-myofascial to kind of massage yourself and your own tissues. And then you've got the flow rope. So I originally started this podcast for artists, athletes, entrepreneurs. I've kind of expanded it to scientists and leaders and stuff over. But yeah, you're definitely a blend of artist, athlete, entrepreneur. You can see it right behind you. So thanks for coming on, Steve. This is very exciting.
Yeah, I'm honored. I call them prime tools. They're over the other shoulder, and the more I become fitness oriented in my life and just try to build the sensations of like what's actually going on in this world and what happens when I use these, it's kind of steered me in particular directions. So I appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat with you and share what my part of the journey in this crazy spiral world we live in.
Yeah, awesome. So this is Quality Values Podcast. The core question is, what are your values in the context of your story? So we'll start with the context, kind of figure out your story, and then I'll kind of dig into the values and kind of the underlying forces that drive you and that determine the direction that you're driven in. So yeah, that's how I like to do it. But um, I always like to start with some common ground, and I know that you lived on the road for a while. I lived in the bus myself for a brief period of time, and I know you had a van. So tell me about that. What took you that way, and what was your experience on the road?
Well, if you can do it, do it. If you're a person that is interested in it, do it. I'll say that before anything else comes out. Um, it was great. It was a challenge, as any endeavor in the world that's kind of outside the box is, and you're outside of the box of the convention of living in a normal housing situation, and as soon as you jump into the four walls of a van, or a bigger box truck or something like that, whether you build it out yourself or it's something somebody else makes, like there's a real different sense of freedom. You really like, you just instantly, like there's a fresh air and you go, wow, I could go anywhere and I have all my stuff with me. This changes like all of my priorities. What's really important. So that might be something you had, like I think
Yeah, for sure.
every person I've spoken to that's done van life, as we call it, is like, yeah, I really reevaluated my world and 2 years or 10 years in, I'm still doing it, or move on, whatever the case. And now the workshop you see behind me and all these things are kind of the convergence, as I've been calling it, of all of these forces in my life and in my world and in my early life that brought me to this point, coming together and being able to share it with the world. So I'm really stoked.
Sweet. So take me into that. What is this convergence of forces? What are the different forces that are coming together for you? And then kind of dive into how you got here.
I think pain is one. First and foremost, it's something we all know is real. Whatever your background or way of life or politics, whatever the case, like everybody experiences pain, physical, visceral pain, spiritual pain, or emotional pain, any number of levels. So, diving into it as something to try to shrink in my life has always been kind of an ideal. I started my athletic career, like basically you breaking a leg as a 13-year-old kid, and recovering from that and not really understanding what the effects of it were going to be. And I healed fine. I broke my left tibia by rolling my ankle, and my toes moved toward like the center of my body. So I snapped the tibia on the growth plate. So that leg ended up being a little shorter than the other, but unbeknownst to me. So I was walking around with like a flat tire on one side. So the chronic pain kind of snuck up earlier than other people. So I feel like I had this signal like, oh, fitness is going to be different for you. You have to focus on like these other sensations going on, because occasionally I would just like have a day where I was flattened on my back because like my leg or my muscle would have a weird spasm or something like that. And I would talk to other people and people wouldn't necessarily be experiencing the same thing. So I think it kind of took me outside of convention to begin with. And I think that's something that's really important, if you're investigating something new in the world, is a willingness to be kind of foolish and explore outside of convention, in the wilderness. And that's really what van life gives you the opportunity to do, right? You get to just take the road and take the path that you see fit in the moment, rather than being stuck in this kind of laminar ingrained flow. You're in more of a chaotic mode in your life.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I've found a lot of wisdom in the wilderness myself. And it's also I can relate to on the pain thing. I tore my ACL when I was 9. I had a surgery when I was 10 on it, but it was like
Early.
yeah, early, and it was the same thing. It healed all right. It took a while because it was the long process that they did a different surgery. Same thing. It was growth plates were an issue at the time. Um, but they ended up being the same height, even though there was a risk they wouldn't. But yeah, it's I would it just the nerves are a little different going down through my foot, and it's definitely kind of given me a heightened sense of like each side of my body, and then I've had to kind of use my conscious mind more to bring them in alignment. I still, yeah, I don't know. I had this moment where I was running, and for the first time in years, like it felt like it used to be before my knee surgery, and it had been like a long time of getting everything back in whack. It had been like a little misfiring. So yeah, it's
Right.
cool.
Right. I think, to jump into the fitness side of things, I feel like the creative aspect of some of this sometimes are kids that had that intense experience and then went back into normal life, and that like then when they were presented with new information or challenges like other people, they've had this wildly intense experience with maybe pain or an injury or something, so they gauge it totally different. So if you never have like an appropriately painful experience to um kind of box your ideas in, or allow them out, really, like you're able to explore farther reaches, more extremes than other people. You may not be as creative as the person next to you, just because of these kind of sharper experiences. One that comes to mind really for me was being in a boating accident when I was young and caught under a boat. And I kind of like had to solve this problem where I like had to go underwater and, get myself out of underneath this boat that had hit a log and capsized over. It was just in a river, but I was like 4 years old, So I think that there's like a response that happens. If you said you were 9, 8 or 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
At 9.
like you had to psychologically, physically, and like energetically respond to this in ways that, another 9-year-old just hasn't had to do. They just get to run around and have more fun. So it definitely puts us on a different wavelength when thinking about all problems, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. If you dive into something deep in any way, you kind of develop your own framework to come from. Like, it's like an athlete who's a true master. They might have a, like, I'm a baseball fan, but there's some guys who have a super unorthodox swing, but it's only because they mastered the basics first that they were able to like kind of like get from the universal frameworks to like their own individual framework, and then they can start playing from there. But it's all has to stay in alignment with the universe, you know?
Yeah, I love where you're going with that because something that I'm kind of stumbling into is a swinging map, basically like a way to map the different ways that we articulate our bones to make a swing and like what the different ways of doing that are and where our feet are placed and like the optimal vector lines to do that. And that's actually an outgrowth of something else, the gait map, which is more about how we can walk and um, not the proper form. Cause I kind of I'm discovering that like there isn't one through this. Like I think that we're so ingrained into thinking there's like one way of thinking because we're wearing shoes. We walk on these flat surfaces and we walk in a straight line on a flat surface all the time without having to traverse all these different hills and stuff. Of course, we're going to think there's only one gait pattern, but really, like, we got to be able to do all of these different things. So we can get into that, when we get into the more details of those theory stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Let's honestly dive right into it since it's all you've got a few different fitness you're talking about this gait math, you've got the body level, but they're all connected, they're all so I kind of that's my goal is to kind of dig into all these things separately and then kind of start pulling out the common threads. But yeah, so just with walking, what um first of all, just explain exactly what the gate map is. Your Instagram and everything will be in the description everywhere below. I know you have videos of it there, but for anyone listening, explain kind of how it looks, and then I'm curious what you do with it, and then we'll start digging deeper.
Great. Um, it really centers around this idea. A lot of these things they start as an artistic exploration, and then I'm looking at patterns that may interlace or converge with these kind of artistic inspirations. Um, and I'm always kind of trying to build the sensation of like what's true in my body, because pain is a signal of like, this is definitely true, but you don't want to be going in this direction. So there's obviously another, like a better available path for us to move through in reality. And I think that it really just it boils down to how we look at the way we travel. And we tend to look at reality through straight lines because we throw spears to hunt animals. We've been doing that forever. So we track things in this very like point A, point B, grid-like kind of way. And this is a grid, but what I've done is I've taken some observations in science and mathematics, and I've applied them to the artistic inspiration. The artistic inspiration is the spiral or the Fibonacci curve. And the Fibonacci curve is a pattern you can observe in reality that correlates to a very simple math um, movement. It's the number added to a number prior to it. So it starts at 0, and then you add the number 1. And then you add the number 1 to 0, and you get 1. And then you add 1 to 1, and you get 2. And you add 2 to 1, and you get 3, and on and on and on. So this represents a ratio of a constant that we see in the Nautilus shell and in how spiral galaxies spin and how we actually walk on 2 feet. I really believe that we as a biological organism, not us as humans, this is part of biology's response, or maybe DNA as this like substructure of biology that's information added to matter, how it solved gravitation and how it decided to translate through space rather than in a straight line. There's this essence of like overcoming gravitation, and we still don't really understand what gravitation is. The farthest science on it actually says it doesn't exist. And my thought is it's all rotation. There's no gravitation. It's all rotation, right? In some way, shape, or form. But I digress. The grid
Let's
is,
keep keep,
yeah,
let's
yeah.
go back to that digression later.
Sure. Um, it all boils down to a circle, right? Your center of mass, if you're standing in a still place, is basically a circle that has little adjustments moving forward or back, kind of balancing you in space. But then when you go to move forward, you're not making a straight line. Your body has to make all of these micro adjustments and curve movements to actually just take a step. And this grid is an attempt to map the potentials of that step, but within a like regular framework. And what that means is you might take a step, but your foot might be off in one direction or another. There's all sorts of balances and things that happen in your nervous system and in the environment that cause this like chaotic model, right, when you land. So it kind of covers both of these things where it's like a hopscotch with options. So you get to try all of these different potential gait patterns. And my observation is as soon as I try stuff that my body is not used to, I'm integrating new musculature and creating a better gait profile, right? It's not just one gait pattern that I should be good at. I should be able to traverse space up and to the left and up and to the right and down and you know move through these hilly environments with different types of terrain and such, and grab onto objects like I would, you know, if I was climbing a tree or something, for instance. So I think that like we evolved in an environment where these types of things were much more natural. Maybe we were balancing on trees in such a way where our feet were always turned in a way that our hamstrings are more activated in that orientation. And it was never required for us to pick up heavy weights. But as soon as we started doing so, we made these straight line connections and kind of got lost in the natural way to move around.
Yeah, I love that spiral thought. The math is interesting. I don't know a ton about the math, but I've had clients. I'm a trainer, and when they're learning a squat, I'll kind of tell them to like corkscrew their leg into the ground, and I like the concept of slack. It's almost like if you're wringing out a towel, you know how you twist it, creating that spiral, and that like creates tension throughout. That's kind of the image that I've used to explain that to some clients. But
That's 100% consistent. You know,
yeah,
the body is really like a towel, you know, in motion, spiraling one
yeah,
way and the other. But I think it's actually two next to each other. You know, if you
yeah,
can visualize that, and I came up with a word to talk about a type of motion that we do that we haven't described yet, um, that has to do with how those two towels interact. But I like to think of them more like slinkies that are interwoven, because like when you move one part of the slinky, it's gonna like coil the whole rest of it and kind of shake it around. And that's really how we work. You know, if you visualize yourself as those two towels spinning, it's like, oh, there is a big coil on one side that can rotate in all of these really interesting ways. And on the other side, there's the same system, but maybe you're not as in tuned into that side because you're always opening doors with the right hand side, or you're getting on the horse or getting into your car the same exact way every day. So you really have you know, so many micro activations of these inner spirals. And that's where these aches and pains in our spines come from, because we're just translating through reality super asymmetrically through one side. So all of this is really an attempt to restore what I call prime lines or prime movement in my own body. And that's an exploration of these types of tools we were talking about. They're all represented in anatomy and somehow represented in the gait pattern as well, because they're consistent with how it's designed. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. So what is prime movement? How would you define that? You may have alluded to it earlier when you were talking about like kind of the opposite feeling of pain. Is that yeah, is that kind of what, like, are those two interwoven?
Definitely. Um, I would say that we've certainly stumbled into it's very similar to what would be called mechanotransductive, what I would call positive. So when you move in a way where your body manufactures the proper hormonal and psychological responses to the environment instead of the wrong adaptations. For instance, the observation with long hold stretches is that you gain joint laxity and that your joints become unstable. My personal experience with that is yes, that happens, because you will tend to think in straight lines when you're first trying to understand your body, and doing so, stretching the muscles in an intense fashion, can put all of the tension through the joints rather than through the muscles like we're trying to experience, because the muscles are actually just a different shape and they require specific rotation and actions to be um, challenged. I don't think that they should be challenged beyond what I call their lag force or their stretch response. Sitting strongly or long into that stretch response makes a whole bunch of other things happen and kind of destabilizes everything.
Is this related to a stretch shortening cycle? Um, is this a
Certainly.
lot? Yeah. Can you explain what you're talking about relative to that?
Yeah. So like when you're using your tissues, you have the nerve or the neurological instinct or the intent to move, right? And then from there, your body is just handling the intention. So I think of movement as three things: the intent to move, and then your conditioning, and then the actual happening. And the conditioning part of it changes like the window of your capabilities. And then when you go to actually do something, you're trying to do something either within or outside of that window. So your stretch shortening cycle and your stretch response is going to be based on, okay, I'm trying to take this action. And then my conditioning has brought me to such point. And then the body's actual response to it is going to be based on all of those reflexes, right? So it's not necessarily going to be your volitive or your intent that's going to master everything. You really have to be tapped into where you are in your conditioning. You know, there's a lot of times where people have a bad stretch shortening cycle because they'll go out running after they turn 40. I just turned 40. And I'm about to go and do some sprinting with Graham, who the barefoot sprinter, probably after this cast here. And I really have to prepare myself. Otherwise, I'm going to end up in a situation where I'm trying to stretch the box of my capabilities too far and end up with a shortening cycle somewhere in the system that's going to end up in an error feedback loop. So I really try to think on a systems level if I can. Whereas I think that a lot of the industry has been focused on very individuated treatments for things. Functional patterns is one of the first to really say, hey, we should really treat this as a system. But deep in yoga, if you look at Ayurvedic medicine, it treats the body as a whole. It doesn't want to split things up so much. So in essence, there is a similarity there. And, you know, we could go into the symbolism as well. The symbolism is tied into the gate map and this vortex of movement that's kind of emerging out of this whole theory. Like you said, everything really is interwoven. I don't want to engage in this practice without having like a total picture at some point. And I think that takes more than myself. So I'm really trying to invite FP practitioners to discuss this stuff with me if they want to on a cordial level like this, and seeing them in podcasts would be really great. But there's so many minds that are engaging in this spiral evolution right now. It's really, really inspiring. So
Let me tell you kind of how I visualized the spiral in my running. I love trail running. I lived out in Washington. I recently moved to Tennessee, but trails in Washington are awesome. I got super into it out there, and it kind of exemplifies what you were talking about earlier, how every step is unique. You never. It's it's definitely not a straight line in the woods, but it like and there's the topography, and then also the stability. Sometimes there's some loose dirt or mud or a wobbly stone or something like that. Um, but the way I've thought of it, going back to that example I brought up previously with the towel. That's kind of it's being wrung out. It's kind of like the subconscious mind has to keep that towel like just almost fully tight, um, right before the second it makes contact with the ground, and then it fully tightens at that same like moment it strikes. And propels you forward. And then if every all the calculations are right, if you've got the angle right, and you got a good idea of how stable it is, then like you can spring forward efficiently without any energy lost and like absorbing into the ground and pushing off. It's all just kind of firm and ready to just kind of spring forward through the tension of that spiral. Is that what yeah, how what is your understanding of running, or how do you think of the spiral in action? What do you kind of visualize?
all of that's pretty consistent with everything that I'm familiar with, and I'm trying to model. David Weck's um, coiling, balance, locomotive theories are amazing. And as soon as I started applying that stuff when I had some hip pain, like right away, I started having improvements. And I thought, well, I need to explore this too. And I feel like right now I'm standing on his shoulders. He's been so kind to allow me into his space and such. Um, so this exploration of that spiral is running into the gate mechanics in this moment. And I didn't really understand that that's what was going to happen until I started looking at, like, I think there was a moment where I was just looking at Fibonacci, just like in posts, and just looking at all these different relationships. And as an artist does, you just jot, you just plot, you just play. And I think I realized or looked at the Fibonacci and I thought, maybe there's a resonance here. Maybe it's not a fully expanding curve, right? Like when we walk, it stops. When you take a step, you stop that curve and you bounce it across your center of mass to the other side. And then you recoil on the other side and you bounce left and right as well as moving forward. So it's really not a straight line. You're literally coming from a center of mass that's a stable circle, and you're stretching that circle forward in space. And in order to do that, your body creates a Fibonacci curvature in aggregate. There's a ton of different stuff going on in the body, but in aggregate, the ratios are consistent with the rest of reality. That's my true belief. You take a step, you've created a Fibonacci curve, and bam, you've landed into that spot. And then you have that potential momentum. E equals mc squared. Energy equals momentum times coil control squared, right? So coil control on both sides plus the momentum that you're experiencing or not experiencing is going to create the efficiency at the outcome. That was my equation adaptation to locomotion from E equals mc squared. And I think it works because you're controlling two sides of your body. You're creating forward translation. And how much energy you get out of that is based on those things. It's simple and it works with everything else. But then when you get into the field equations, it's like there's all these other things that could happen. So it's just like the trail running. There's a consistent ratio to your steps, but then you have all of these other elements that you have to contend with. And our bodies are really good at responding to that. But because we've been walking in these, soled shoes and on flat ground. We're just not good at that stuff anymore. And when we go to the gym, we're like, oh, we'll get rigid. And then all these old spots in the towel from these injuries that we've had show up and become hyper ossified and hyper stiff. So then when we go to move one side or the other of these coils, we end up with some kind of stretch problem. We end up with a muscle that's not wanting to to contribute and do its job with the rest of them. So we end up with a total system failure because we have one ligament or one joint that really starts to disturb us. And then we go, oh, well, this whole thing, I don't really know what's going on anymore. But it's really that our behaviors have added up to that. And we have to figure out ways to reverse those with the correct mechanical inputs.
And that brings us to the body lever.
Right. That's one of the prime tools.
Yeah. So, and I do want to come back to E equals MC squared, because that's interesting. But let's dive into the body lever. Yeah. So first of all, what was the story behind it? When did you come up with it? Is it something that you've used for a while, and then at some point you're like, oh, I got to sell this, or was it, like, yeah, what was the backstory? And then I'm curious what whether it comes up in the backstory or afterwards, like, what's your intention with it? How do you use
Right.
it? How do you suggest people use it?
It was my response to not having a tool that did what I needed to. I think that's kind of how a lot of these things are discovered. You know, I used to spend a lot of time on a lacrosse ball. I used to spend time on my back with my legs up on an office chair and roll 4 lacrosse balls underneath my back, and one would run away. And I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. And at that time, I had actually been working on a functional handle. So this is 2017, I think, 2016. A functional handle, which would be just a bar that you connect to a cable and you pull on. When I was in yoga, I was like, this isn't going to do everything I need to do. I need to do like push pull stuff. And I had 2 of those clipped together one day. So it was like this big nunchuck. And I thought, well, maybe I could squeeze myself with that, like just kind of playing around. And holy cow, the sensation I got was like nothing else. And I had done so many classes in yoga, and I had seen, one teacher in particular would make you put your knee on the back of the opposite calf in a crouched pose, and it was excruciating, but it really felt great. And I thought, well, maybe there's a more complete practice in yoga, and there just isn't. So I thought, well, what if I could make one with this crazy squeezy tool? It's like just like a big nunchuck. And I started looking around. Nobody else had made anything like that. Came up with the name, and I was like, okay, I'll make a few of these and whittle them down in my little garage. And I had some broomsticks I cut in half and like just like screwed them together and put them in front of my friends, and they're like, "What is this?" But one buddy of mine, he's like, "If you make me a nice one, I'll buy it." And I thought, okay, what's the next step? And from there on, it was like, okay, what else can I do to make this approachable for people? Because it's a kind of a strange device, but it really orients you. You're like, what is that thing? And what I realized over a long period of time is it feels like and is an extension of our skeleton. And it's taught me so much about fitness in general. So my intent with it really is just to share it and the teaching that it has shared with me. And I think that as other people use it, they'll experience the same things as if they're paying attention to the same sensations. Um, there are a lot of implications with it. It taught me how to analyze bone vectors, like it's 2 bones kind of connected together by connective tissue. If you are aware what it looks like, it's like 30-inch sticks with like 4 inches of rope in between them. And it kind of resembles 2 leg bones. So you're kind of pulling on 2 leg bones, but you wrap those around your leg and you can pressurize your skeleton or pressurize your muscles first and then your skeleton. And I think that it can cause osteoblast responses. And I think I'm trying to get some research lined up on this, that it can increase bone density through just crimping and massaging the bones and the tissues to your level of comfort. Like you're not going to go beyond into pain. The intent of this is to ride that curve of proximal development where you're just getting just the right of input. It's going to give you just the right of output, and you recover from, and you come back stronger, you come back more resilient. So
I like that curve of proximal development. That's I always had this theory, the when I was like younger, the maximum sustainable rate, but that's the fancy way to say it, I think. Um,
well, you got to keep yourself in a state of not biting off too much of the apple all at once
right.
because you're going to choke on it. I like to think of it as thin slicing.
Hmm.
You know, when you go to try to learn a yoga pose, for instance, you thin slice things. You don't try to blast your way through everything. I mean, there is a rhyme and reason or time and place to get an imprint of a posture or of a movement, and then to dial back and kind of work on the individuated things, building the sensation of it. But the ultimate goal is that you do the thing and you play. So, you know, however you can build your sensations to get there, I think is a good route. And this tool is so self-regulated. You know, you can put just a tiny bit of pressure on your temple if you want to, and you can have that thing around your head, you know, or you can get your quad by laying on the ground in a straddle and leaning on the top stick while you're just laying on the bottom one. There's a totally different level of pressure being applied there, but it's the same tool, and you're just manipulating your body position and like how you feel about the input. So it's really just so intuitive and powerful. I'm really excited to start seeing, you know, the first few hundred of them going out and seeing people's responses. And um, I'm going to get myself a DEXA scan so that I can see what my bone density is now. Since I've been using these things for 7, 8, you know, better part of 10 years, I'm hoping that they, you know, the scan comes back where I'm higher than average. I do drink a lot of milk, you know, like a ton of calcium too. So that may be a little boost. But if a bunch of people were to get scans and for that to be studied, the implications for the elderly would just be amazing, you know, because like I said, it's such a simple tool to use. They could just start working with their muscles and prying on their bones a little bit and maybe get to walking a little bit better. And that would be like such an ultimate reward for me, seeing other people do what I've done to get into more of the programming and how I use the tool, do what I've done and make their experience of life like a thin slice better every day. That really does add up to having like a whole fruit basket of capabilities that you can pull from when you need to, when the life demands, you know, and when you want to have fun and enjoy your body and take a run with
Yeah.
you know your friends.
Yeah, I know bone density is one of the main indicators of longevity. It's I know grip strength is one, bone density is one, and it's anything I think you can do to maintain those things or improve those things. Um, yeah, just to me that logically makes sense as the most efficient, the most the maximal yielding ways to spend your time exercising and manipulating your body. I'm curious, what's your flow with the body lever? I love how you bring it up as kind of like a tool to teach, like to self teach yourself about your own body and really maybe human bodies in general. But what does that look like? Is it something you play around with every morning, every evening, before a training session, afterwards? Do you have the same routine that you do kind of every day with it? Do you focus more on whatever areas are sore, tight? How does it kind of fit
Sure,
into your
sure.
life now that you've been using it for a while?
I think that as any good creator will do, you know, I've tried it in every which way I could possibly imagine. You know, first on my own frame, and then after developing a sense of it, then on other people actually using it as a tool. That's something I do tell people in the beginning, like you really want to develop a sensitivity before applying this kind of leverage to other people because there's a disconnect there. But the thing that's very powerful about that is that we have so much information running through our hands that when you do have both of these in both hands, it really, really is an extension of your skeleton. And I think that what happens is a natural progression of understanding the inner mapping of the lines of tension that you have. And the more that you explore, the more positions that you put the body lever in, you're able to access these places that you've never been able to touch for yourself, right? It's like you go to a therapist and they can do amazing things. They can give you an amazing experience. They can do things that body lever cannot do, period. No questions asked. But on the other side of the body lever, because it's inside of your nervous system responses, you can do things that the therapists can't do as well. So it's a continuous practice. I've avoided the need to go to chiropractors many times because I lay them parallel to one another and I lay my spine in between them on the ground. And I'm able to just wiggle my ribs and my spine when I'm really in a state of discomfort there and actually just get the relief that I need. So I've become in many, many ways my own therapist. And that's really the goal, is to give other people the same leverage that I've had. Now, I would go to 50 yoga classes in a month sometimes. Now that's pretty ballistic. I wouldn't do that again. This tool will also give you increased or decreased recovery time because you're able to essentially reshape the casing of the muscle regularly. You're able to kind of stretch and mold the muscle and move the fluidity around within it. So you're able to really get optimal hydration everywhere on all of these big muscle groups. So soreness is like so greatly diminished. I've had so many people come back to me and say, man, I can train like 2 extra days a week right now because I'm just able to tackle these areas and get recovery going in all of these ways I've never been able to before. I would say that the risk with that is hyper adaptation into your sport. It's like, in a way, if you were to take a painkiller. So there is a rhyme and reason to learning these lines and actually understanding on a deeper level, not just like, oh, this gets my body better, but how is this actually moving in my body? And when you roll with this, you'll notice right away, oh, this isn't a straight line. My leg doesn't just contract in a straight line from my hip to my knee. There's 4 different quadricep muscles, and they all do these weird different things. And when you use the tool, you'll start to feel these curvatures and a natural, like I said, mapping of your inner world. And then you can start to change these subtle ways that you move at first. And then that grows into a much bigger equation of changing your entire framework, or the storm inside your body, the vortex of movement in your experience, so that it's a better experience. And the body lever is going to lead you there. And I think that prime tools and prime movements are going to lead you there, or any human there, because those lines of curvature and movement obey the base laws that we've adapted ourselves to over many, many generations. So we've just gotten lost in kind of the conventional fitness exploration, because it's an exploration just like anything else.
Yeah, I think when I trace it back, what makes sense to me is a lot of that's in bodybuilding. Like it all got about hypertrophy and getting your reps in and your volume per week and everything. Everyone switched to machines, which is just all straight lines. Um, all right, I want to circle way back to the swing map. Now that we've kind of have some more context, how does the swing map fit into this? I've thought about similar things. I played baseball, I do martial arts,
Mhm.
and there's the arm angle. That I was a pitcher. Sometimes I'll lower it, and and then I love kettlebells too. You can swing them in
Right.
all different directions. So what are kind of, I guess, what are the axes of your swing map? What are the kind of, or what are the core
So
foundations of yeah, how it's all built?
yeah, it's really just an outgrowth, and it's the same map as the gate map, but micronized so that you can use it on a single mat. Whereas the gate map is like 5 mats long. Like I have one right underneath me right here. Um, and you could take 10 steps on the gate map. Otherwise, you couldn't get your gate cycle going, right? You need to be able to traverse distance. That's really important. We create what is that, lateral power, right? Whether we're carrying something or pushing against something, or fighting another human being, which is kind of the ultimate prime implement, right? It's another anatomy that's just like us, so it's the most complicated fitness tool that there is, and that's why wrestling and all those other sports are so popular. Jiu-jitsu, but the gate map on one mat would just be you standing and creating tension in different vectors. So using the David Weck green dot theory, and really kind of coming close to the ideas he has around lines of force, his beautiful um, uh, content and rhetoric behind what he's come up with understanding how the feet orient to the ground and such. And I've just built on that in my own way, looking in my own offshoot. How do we integrate these models into this helix design, right? It's all basically called helix theory because it's all around this idea that when you roll a circle, you're stretching that circle, and that circle becomes a curve. Well, two curves, or even one curve moving through space, is a helical or helix shape. So everything we do is moving this circle or this helix through space in various ways. And I think that the gate map informs the swing map. And when you stand on either one of them with your feet in particular organizations with these angles correct, that the spiral force reflexively responds up the helical, the spirals, without you having to think about it. It's just that we think about it too much. And straight lines are thinking, and curved lines are unconscious. Like when you're moving through a space in curvature, you're not necessarily thinking about all of these little points. You're just spiraling. So I'm trying to communicate those unconscious undertones to this, where the gate map and the swing map aren't strict. They're suggestive guides, and then based on the situation you're in, you're going to respond in a particular way. So when thinking about the actual swings themselves, that's going to depend on the sport. Obviously, golf or baseball or lacrosse, you're going to have different stuff going on. Lacrosse, you want to know how to swing every which way you possibly can with one of those things, because you're running all over the field, right? So you got to be good at all of these different foot positions. Well, if you use the gate map and you get all these gate patterns down, and then you interweave that with the swing map where you're standing on a small gate map and swinging in all of these ways, it weaves together in this reflexive way that's just emerging in my body in a beautiful way. I've had a couple of friends reach out and say, hey, I've known you a long time, but what you're doing right now is causing some serious changes, and you're no slouch, man. Keep it up. There's something really magical to this. So I'm swinging away.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. I showed you my spin board before.
Yeah, I really love that tool. It's very
Yeah,
interesting.
it's I spent a lot of time thinking about like a kind of a compass for it to just to map out and organize different exercises. Since I kind of developed my own flows with it, but it's like freestyle, I just I don't
Yeah,
really think about it.
yeah.
I just kind of play around, and it's like I'm a kid. Um, I'm sure you've done the same with your
And
things,
every
but
and every adjustment and every little change that you make to that is going to create a differentiation in that flow. That's how important
yeah,
just the small details are on these tools. I
yeah,
really like to think of dumbbells as a monopole magnet. You know what those are?
no,
In science, they talk about this idea. of
Ooh.
monopole magnets. Normal magnets have two sides, north and south
Yeah.
pole, to keep it simple, where they like have this movement of field lines that move out of them and such. Well, a monopole magnet has no opposite pole. It doesn't exist in nature, right? We just
Mhm.
made it up. Well, that's what dumbbells are. It's a symmetrical load on both sides of your hand. Where in nature do you ever find that? It'd be so exceedingly rare. Like, we can't possibly be built in such a way to pick things up that are based like that. So
Yeah.
I feel like on this even micro level, that they are causing these straight line responses. Whereas if the weight was different on both sides, like my helix bell or my helix mace or any mace bell that you use,
Yeah.
those are going to force you to learn the actual movements our bodies are built to do. And by stopping and slowing down too much, you might actually compromise some of the inner integrity, by doing too much heavy lifting or by doing too much stretching, for example.
Yeah. I've got a mace too. I love it. And yeah, I've seen yours. Yours is sweet. It's definitely the high end one. How does it all connect? I can feel it connected, but how does the body lever play into um the spiraling, since it and then also the the maps, whether it's the swing or the grid.
Sure, sure.
Um yeah, how how did you get to the grids from the body lever?
The pathway there is through the prime tool concept. Like I said before, the body lever kind of informed me. It taught me that it was resembling two leg bones. Okay, so I thought, well, what if there are other tools like this? And then I looked at a ball, and I looked at the Bosu ball, and I looked at an elastic strap, and you look at anything in the gym, and you go, okay, can I find that shape in my body? Yes or no? And the more familiar you are with anatomy, the more like creative and like shapes you could find, right? So if you were to think about these basic shapes, you have a ball, you have a stick, you have a rope, you have and combinations of those things, right? You have a ball on the end of a stick. Well, that would be a mace. Oh, but that's actually also your femur bone, right? So there's a consistency with our anatomical structures in the shapes outside of us. And I would call those prime implements or prime tools, because when you pick those up, you're forced to integrate them. When you pick anything up, you're forced to integrate it into your center of mass and your skeletal system. But when you pick up a prime tool, it's a system that your body is already familiar with. And it's built on the same subsystem, like architecture that this place that we exist in is built on. It's not built out of the synthetic thought of a human mind, right? When we have these tools with lots of symmetrical parts or with lots of moving parts, they may not function in a way that's cohesive with reality. And those small deviations are going to cause a type of response through what I call the movement vortex, or all of the spiral locations in your body that you can vortice or move through and control, which are less than our muscles. I think that we actually control our bodies through the gyroscopes of our bones and the senses surrounding them, because this is all consistent with stars and the solar system. And why wouldn't it be? Like, if you look up there and there's a spiral galaxy and then a bunch of planets spiraling around that, and then you have a star with planets around it, and then you go to a planet and then you see these little people spiraling around it, why would it be any different? Why would the geometry and the shape of things be any different if we observe these Fibonacci curves and these helices at all of these levels? So then we get to the ground and we get in our flat shoes and we're like, oh, we walk in straight lines. I don't think so. I don't think so. So, the body lever showed me that my anatomy is consistent with that spiral design. And I thought to myself, what other tools? And now this is an exploration in prime tools. So you look at the Bosu ball, it's the shape of the diaphragm, right? It's a half ball, and you press on it and it kind of moves out in all these interesting ways. Well, when you breathe, your diaphragm is going to move like that, depending on what you're doing. So when you're on that thing, you're forced to breathe in a particular way. And I feel it, and I think that that are really poor at breath work really tend to like the Bosu ball, and they flip it upside down. They use it the other way. A stick is a bone. Um, and then you have things like a strap, like a round strap that's an elastic piece would be like your carpal tunnel here in the hand. The body lever, obviously, two bones and a connective tissue in between them. And then something like the Lever King, if you're familiar with that from functional patterns, it's a sling. So it's a 2-point connected strap. So you're like forced to create this almost bicep-like relationship where there's a connection here and a connection here. And then when this moves, the whole assembly has to move. And I'm trying to display that on my arm because you have two different places in your arm where it does the same thing. So that tool is a prime implement as well. And it's just a strap with some connectors on it. So this rule really applies to a lot of stuff. And I think that as soon as other people start to get wind of this, they're going to go, oh, this other thing I'm working with is a prime tool. I really want to add to this theory. So I really want people's feedback. Like, what are you working with that resembles our anatomy that I'm not familiar with? Because there's going to be some hidden benefits to those types of things.
Yeah, it's so far the functional patterns is awesome, and WEC, the WEC method. Anyone who's listening who doesn't know David WEC, you've brought up WEC and WEC method. That's kind of his theories, and then he's the inventor of the Bosu ball. So, but yeah, he's definitely kind of a cornerstone. How did you get involved with him? I know I've seen you guys together in some content. You guys are both in California, right?
Yes, he's down
Yeah.
in San Diego, and I visited his space a number of times, 6 times, all last year. And the first time was because I had met a friend of his. He's super inviting in his space. He has a lab down there in downtown San Diego, and it's so much fun. The energy around that man and the space he's created is it's electric. Every time I'm like, I really want to just meet everybody I can. And, if I have a couple minutes with Dave, amazing. We get to play push hands with people and stuff. There's lots of fun games that they're always engaging in, not just for fitness, but for evolving the mind around fitness. And I think it's beautiful to see a convergence of these personalities instead of so much competition. I realize that at the end of the day, we all have to pay our bills, but fitness is an endeavor that's meant for humanity. And I think that if we stop warring with ourselves about our opinions of things, and we come up with really, really good guidelines for the next generations, then we're going to all be in a better state of being in humanity. So he's really pointed at that. David has really pointed at that. And, I'm not wearing his shirt today, but I wear Every Step Stronger and Every Rep Stronger shirts regularly because I really do believe in that model that, it really takes focus on every step. Just like I say, it's about thin slicing. So I was introduced to him first with his content and doing some rope flow for about a year, just playing around and feeling some of the benefits and feeling really good about it. And one day I was at Bhakti Fest out Joshua Tree, and I saw another person doing rope flow. And I don't see these creatures everywhere. So I thought, oh, I'm going to get my rope and go over there and make a friend. And I did. And Daniel from Saluz, he is part of a company that does algae, which is great products. I've used a lot of their mushroom blends and things of that nature. He said, Steve, I have David's number. Why don't you just go over there? And visit him. I'm like, are you serious? He's like into that sort of thing. He's like, oh yeah, he's super nice. Just give him a call or shoot him a text and go over there and see him. So that's how I got introduced the first time. I was just coming back from a show and thought, okay, I'll cruise through and see what's going on. And went back and visited a number of times. And they decided to start carrying the body lever before I sold out last year and moved everything to pre-sales and pre-orders. So um, and he basically said, everything I was working on was really cool. And he said, just keep going. With all of this stuff, it's a constant exploration. So I like to think of it as a clear blue sky, and any conversations are an exercise in, Einstein like thought experiments. And you never know what you'll discover playing around with E equals MC squared again.
Yeah, yeah. You talk about blue skies. I was thinking a little bit ago about blue oceans. That whole business theory, uh, like there's no competition in new fields because everyone's just progressing it together, right? They're all building off of each other, and so if you're trying to sell a new dumbbell or something, that's a zero sum game. Any market share you gain is coming out of someone else's pocket, and hence the competition. But kind of with a lot of these things, with these functional patterns, the WEC people, and what you're talking about, kind of uh, I don't even know, core anatomical
Mm, mm,
philosophies.
mm, mm.
Yeah, it all like this is a there's plenty of room to grow, and I love what you're doing. I think it's a noble mission to kind of collaborate as you go.
Thank you. Thank you. Like I said in the beginning, like I am an artist first and foremost. So I come at this from that like foolish place of thinking I could tell the king and queen when they're being silly, and not get killed in the meantime. And that's the fool's job at first. And then you go, wait a minute, there's actually some truth to that silly guy, and maybe we should explore this. And I really hope that we're capable of it because it's like a Manhattan project for human locomotion. Like we should all experience a better life, a better being in this place. We have all this information, like I said before other times, like it's like the Manhattan Project where we got all these minds together around atomic energy. We should be doing that around pain and locomotion. And I think it's happening. I think it's happening. So I'm really stoked. I'm really happy to be a part of it and just lend my voice. Um, I'm not super attached to these things. And that's part of the exploration is like, oh, maybe I've stumbled into something because I've been willing to be foolish about it and be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to put my ideas in front of these people that, may or may not like them very much.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask some entrepreneurial advice as well. I know you kind of self-identify more as an artist than a businessman, but I'm kind of coming from the other side. I went to school for business.
Hmm.
I've got all these distribution chain ideas in my head and all that, but when it just comes down to actually getting started selling a product, since I really intend to do it in the next few months here, like some of the technical aspects, like getting a patent and setting up a payment processing system, like what's that process like? And then just in terms of dealing with inquiries and managing your time and kind of like getting everything all together. What's your experience been like as a businessman as you've been launching this body lever?
I've pretty much been solo most of the time, so it's been pretty much total chaos, right? I think it's like what's that song, 99 Problems, but you don't know that you have them until you get started. You just have the one problem, I want to start my thing. And then you realize, oh, there's all these other things I have to do. So I really try to follow the Gary Vaynerchuk model and triple down on things that I'm really strong at, and then hire out as I can with things that I'm weak at. Because if I were to spend all my time trying to get good at the thing I'm not really interested in, how much further along could I have been if I just focused on my craft, if I just focused on what I'm inspired to do? So I've always had this phrase that I work from inspiration, not desperation. So when I feel desperate, I don't work. I don't work on the thing. I'll work on feeding myself, keeping myself alive, taking care of myself, obviously. But that means that when I am inspired, everything else goes to the wayside, right? Because that feeling and those inspirations are not going to come through in the desperate times. So in the inspired time, you put everything else outside of your need to take care of it if you can, and even sacrifice the things that you may have to make up for later, because those inspirational moments may be the thing that not only take your vision through, but it may also sustain you as the artist who needs those moments to know that the thing is coming. Because, like, really, real, I feel like being an artist of any shape or form and being an entrepreneur can lend you toward behaviors that feel like borderline personality disorder, because you're forced into these situations where you have high and then low emotions really quickly right after one another, maybe one day and then the next day it's like totally different. You're like, oh wow, you kind of get used to these waves and being able to respond in that way. So it feels a little bit like that kind of like crazy curvature in life. But it's all to say that when you feel inspired, throw down, because that's your time. That's when the universe is resonating through you in a way that you may not be able to explain. And I feel like all art really comes from that place of not really being able to explain it so much, because you're vulnerable, you're open to being the fool and putting the thing on paper that you may not be so sure about. But then as you move the needle forward and as you redesign it and as you get to your third, fourth, my number is seventh prototype, you really might have something at that point, because you've exercised all of these fail points, and a failure is an opportunity to surpass yourself. And if your tool fails, it's an opportunity for that tool to surpass its prior design. That's at the end of the day what you're trying to do, is deliver something to people that is so effortless that they don't have to think about the 7 failures that you've already run through and gone, here's the final design that can do everything that I've set in front of you to do.
Yeah, I almost always try to read a book if someone recommends it and I look it up and it has a third edition or something like that. I'm like, okay, this has been worked and appreciated and worked again. All right, let me ask you a similar question about being an artist. I personally just I kind of been in my adult life kind of shifting into that artist identity, and a lot of what you're saying resonates. I kind of get things done in big chunks, and at first that was frustrating since I think just growing up in school, you kind of have a steady flow of homework and you're kind of supposed to like consistency is kind of the easiest path. And then as an adult, like I would get frustrated when I would go through phases of no creative output. Um, but over time, I've kind of developed faith in that the output will come, and that a lot of times when there's nothing, it's all building up for like a big dump of some kind. But and so yeah, a lot of what you say kind of reflects that. But what's your experience been like? How do you when you're going through these phases where you don't want to work on the problem? How do you like how do you like stay eating food and paying rent? Like how do you um just make it work logistically? But then B, how do you kind of like maintain faith in the path or whatever you want to call it? How do you maintain kind of like the energy to pursue forward, or like what do you tie into to know that like you're doing the right thing even when in these slow kind of phases?
Well, I think there's certainly the risk that sometimes you just have to eat the cake that you bake when it comes to the financial side of things. And I lived in a van, and I've lived very low in expectations for what I was going to create in my world, because I was so focused on this particular, endeavor. And I've had great relationships. I've had, learning relationships. I've had all these different experiences in the inner rim. But, believing in yourself, is like something people will say. And really, it's like you don't need much talent to be effective. It's a funny example. My girlfriend and I were talking about our sporks. It's like a spork is a spoon and a fork. It's got all this talent, but it's not very good at anything. It's like, wait a minute, what happened in the structure of this thing? Somewhere we got lost. But if you just stick to being a spoon or a fork, you're going to be really good at that thing. So a lot of times, it like I said, you got to eat the cake that you've baked, and set your expectations lower than you think. But don't stare at the top of the mountain either, because having lofty high goals is great for a moment to inspire a moment, but you really do want to lay every brick as well as you can, because you never know when that brick is going to be the very thing that holds the whole wall together. Because later, because you gifted something to someone that you didn't know, or you just had an exchange where you were generous, or you were accommodating and you didn't freaking want to be, later maybe they came back and they send you a friend, or maybe they made a connection for you that brings the whole endeavor to a whole next level. And I can't tell you in words like how many times that's happened for me, like on the road when I meet somebody and I just have an exchange, and later at another festival or something they come up and say hello and they bring their friends. And and it's not always like monetarily a thing. It's really being this way anyways. Like we talk about the journey of life, and really it's like, where am I going? A lot of us don't really know. I'm fortunate. I have this lever that kind of appeared out of the ether for me, and now it's my Excalibur that I'm responsible for and taking forward in the world. But I adopted that responsibility. So in every person's world, there is a massive weight, a responsibility that they can pick up and utilize as this forward translating force. And it will take you to places well beyond that thing. It's just hard sometimes to focus, or to know that like this isn't the end of the game. And believing in yourself is tough, but people less talented, like the spork, are getting sold out everywhere, and all they did is believe in themselves. So you don't have to be the most talented person. You can be a regular fork, or you can be a regular spoon, and you can do things in the world that nobody could possibly imagine. So that's what I've really tried to stay faithful to, is that like, it's really like what Steve Jobs said: people that less talented and less articulate did things anyways. Everything around us is built by other people. So believe.
Love it. And then kind of on that note, what going forward, what's your agenda? Like what's the belief that's driving you from where you're at now? We've kind of covered a lot of your past, but like what are you going for now? What's is it impacting the world? Is it um selling as many levers as possible? Like what's your driving force, and what's the belief that you're carrying going forward?
Well, selling the levers is obviously one vehicle to move, um, like the ambitions of this project that I've been working on. This project around my life of creating this map and creating these informational tools. It's always been self-reflective, like how do I keep myself out of pain? And that's a constant struggle. I broke my leg as a young kid, and that kind of informed all of this. So I'm still working with lots of shoulder pain as a result. And so my ambition now is to share the things that I've learned. And to do so, I'm trying to put myself in the exact right situation, which means I may have to leave this space soon. But I viewed a really cool house today, and I'm looking forward to potentially moving over there and having a much more presentable space for the education side of this, because this tool is about being at ease It's not a fitness tool at first. The other things I have are, but I really want to show people how to start remapping their understanding of their myofascial system. So understanding where these different muscles are, not just looking at them in a book and saying, "Oh, that's this indecipherable word because it connects to these two bones. It's labeled that." Well, no, I actually have an experience with this tissue, and now I know where it is, and I can feel it, and I can move it, and understand what it's doing in my body. And I want to start to elucidate these details in my content because I've had so much experience with this stuff. But I've been stuck, not stuck. I've been making them. All of my time has been invested in that, especially recently with all of these delays that I've had with my production side. The tariffs from China have set things back like 3 months, and we've had to change production to the Philippines and reroute some through the Philippines. It's been a fiasco. So I appreciate everybody's patience that might be listening that has ordered a body lever. We have 600 on the way, only 350 are spoken for. And they told me that they can handle quite a higher demand if the demand is there. So I'm really, really excited to just share this feeling that you first get when you crimp it the first time. You go, "Oh wow, where's this been all my life?"
That's, so in my last episode, it was with James White. I was kind of we're catching up briefly beforehand. I told you he's the rise of phagy guy, he's a biologist, and he made this discovery, which was big discovery in his field, and he kind of had that eureka moment where it was like a relief for him. Like he understood this thing that he'd been trying to understand forever, but it was also like it was more than that. Like like the way he described it, it was he felt like he had a secret that he just like couldn't wait to share
Mm.
with the world. Like he was just holding on to it until that paper wasn't eventually published and it was out there. Did you? And so to me that kind of indicates like not only did he kind of have something that was like connected a lot of dots for him internally, but he knew that it was a valuable insight for the world. Did you kind of feel that in that when you're talking about feeling it for the first time, was it more than just that physical sensation at the point of contact? Was it kind of like oh man, like this is what I'm the body lover man.
100%. I mean, what I'll explain now is maybe what people will also experience with this thing. There are moments when you first start using the tool where you'll hit these pockets of tissue. Like for me, this is what has happened. I've had almost blackouts. Like my vision goes a little gray because I'm hitting like a pain point and my nervous system has responded. And it's that feeling like if you get up too fast, right? Maybe there's something being released into your bloodstream, whether it's toxins or whatever other justifiable thing. We could explore that. But for me, the experience is so euphoric, unbelievably so. Like when I found my trigger point on this right bicep and I first crimped it on this arm, I wept, man. Like I cried because I just said to myself, have I been carrying my whole body right here? Because it's just so intense when you actually get some sensation on it and it's guided by your nervous system, right? It's not a therapist who touches it and you say, "Oh, well, you get that spot." It's like, well, sure, for a couple of seconds, and then like meaning well, but not actually getting to the root of it. Like, I just, I can't. I mean, I've lost my train of thought at this point because it's so emotional, but I can't wait for that to happen for other people and for them to report back about it because the next day I'll have I've had radical changes in like how my body felt to move in certain spaces of it that it had felt restricted in for years. Now, that's not going to fix all of the deep problems, but I think it fixes what I call a level one adaptation or like a soft adhesion, something that is like, oh, I've been doing this activity for a while and my body's feeling stuck here. But it's not like a throwing arm where you're like, hey, I threw a football for 25 years in the NFL. Yeah, you're going to have some particularly like differentiated patterns in that situation. So take me back. What's the next question?
Um, when you're using it, like I've gone to chiropractors before, and I think it's a great practice. And kind of my impression of it is like they change my alignment, and and obviously their objective is to get my alignment to the most efficient alignment that they can with their manipulations. Um, Now, when they make those changes, it's initially like a setback because my body's been developed in whatever alignment it was in walking into the
Right.
appointment, right? And so they kind of pull me into a place that I'm unfamiliar, that my muscles haven't been used to pulling from. So initially, I've been sore afterwards. And kind of what I found, and this isn't a ton of experience. This is like one of my friend's moms was a chiropractor, and when she had some time, she used to help me out with my shoulder. But yeah, well, what I came to realize is like what you got to do is get the adjustments, but then also train in those adjusted positions to kind of
Yeah.
reinforce the strength. Have you kind of noticed that, like when you use the body lever, does it kind of like a mini setback, but a stronger base to build from going forward? Is it kind of that cycle?
You're not adjusting yourself with it. Like if you lay on it in particular ways, you can get spine adjustments and stuff. Like there have been ways that I used to pop my hip with it when I was having some SI stuff going on, and it's really nice. You can do that sort of thing, but bonging the bones around, as it's said, I don't find to be the best methodology. There is definitely a time and place for it. Emergency medicine is a thing. Um, but it really is like you were saying, like restore, you said like exercising around it, you really want to facilitate the correct curvature changes, because the intent of the intent of moving the bones or bone setting is getting them back to the place where they should be, whatever the practitioner thinks that, wherever they think that is, so that you can go out and live your life in such a way that's going to keep them there. But there's a disconnect because they don't educate you on how to move. And we're moving in these ways that are involved with cars and stepping on the gas and brake pedal 10,000 times a month, and sitting in desks and using a mouse with our right hand, a keyboard with our left, so we're twisted in particular ways. We all have these very similar society-based vortex problems. I would say that it all adds up to being a storm. It's a vortex of all of these interwoven points in our body. And I've come up with a new symbol that's grown out of some ancient symbols from yoga and other places in the world. And I've added some lines to it. And it actually fits into the entire map here. And I've called it the hexatron before, but that's not a very nice name. I'm calling it like the hex star right now, because it's a shape that represents the human body in very simple lines. And by looking at that, you can kind of get an idea of where these rotational spaces are. And I think it'll really help to demystify how to move our bodies, if we're thinking about it in the correct shape. Because if we're looking at a square and we're a hexagon, we're obviously going to do stuff like a square, but actually the hexagon doesn't really fit in there very well. So
Yeah, I really liked I mean, at the time I saw the video, it was the Hexatron, but the Hexastar, that was one of my favorite videos you had because it just made sense. Like, and it was the kind of, for me, my shoulders roll forward, especially my right one. Since I was a pitcher for so many years, that it like changed the range of motion isn't the same on each side. I haven't played as much baseball over like the last decade, so it's evened out to some degree, but it still is, and then mine internally rotates.
right, right.
I always forget which one's supination and pronation, but yeah, like I'm good at throwing a two seam fastball, but I always struggled with the cutter, the ones where your fingers are on the outside.
External rotation,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And there's
Um.
probably, there's a high probability, or at least an increased probability, that your left foot externally rotates a little bit,
Yes. Yep.
right?
And this.
Because
Yeah.
that's that line that goes across the body that's interconnected through the slinky. And what I call that is spherobolic. So there's two types of non-Euclidean travel, and that's spherical and hyperbolic. Spherical means basically like external rotation, but if you were to take every type of external rotation and combine it, that would be spherical movement. If you were to take every type of internal rotation and combine it, that would be hyperbolic movement, all right? So if you're twisting both shoulders in toward both each other,
Yeah.
you're doing a double hyperbolic like hug toward yourself. Whereas if you were externally rotating and expanding your chest, you can notice my voice changing now. It does something to the diaphragm and you're in this spherical expression. But what happens when you're one and one? So external rotation on one side and internal rotation on the other, spherobolic, right? It's both things. So you're caught, or most of us are caught in a spherobolic twist where our right shoulder is twisted forward and our left foot externally rotates following that right shoulder. Now, obviously, that's not everybody, but a lot of people have that problem. And then you go into yoga class and you stretch and stretch and stretch, and you put more external rotation compression on that SI joint, and then you end up with problems. But it doesn't happen on the other side, right? It's like, well, why is it one side, not the other? It's because we're twisted, not in one way, but in multiple ways, all across these vortices in our bodies. And the hex star or the hexatron is my attempt at changing the symbol of how we look at ourselves from the center, this spot right underneath the sternum, right in the front of the diaphragm, and outward. Everything is connected to that point, you know. So for you to fix your shoulder, you could actually work on left leg internal rotation, and that's actually going to pull that shoulder down and back a little bit as well because it's part of that same system.
Yeah, that was honestly seeking that internal rotation. That's when I came up with my spin board. That was kind of in that.
Mm.
It was in that. It was originally a Lazy Susan on a rock in my garage. That was the the initial version.
And that was what, bro? That's product by work by inspiration, not
Yeah,
desperation. You're inspired to do something for yourself, and you're like, wait a minute, maybe I can
yeah,
provide something for other people, and that value is everything. You know,
yeah,
I think that that's the real value proposition of this whole project is that I'm involving myself in a way with these tools and with these ideas in order to move the world.
yeah. Well, the world will be better for it. And for anyone watching, I highly recommend checking out the Hexatron or now Hexastar videos on Steve's page because it's a map and like you can just the way you explain it, you can understand for yourself. Like, oh yeah, my right shoulder does internally rotate, my left foot does externally rotate. You can see on the map, and then you kind of break it down. Like, these are the common misalignments, the common areas of injury for these patterns. So it's yeah, I would love to see what that turns into.
And the common body types. You can actually
Yeah,
look at the hexatron and go, oh, if I'm really good at this thing and this thing, I kind of walk around like this. Oh, like a big
yeah,
bodybuilder with internally rotated legs, but a big chest. Or if you do lots of yoga, your legs may externally rotate and you may slouch forward a lot because you do lots of push-ups. You know, it really does
yeah.
give some good info. So
There's a book called The Wisdom of the Body. I remember I did an episode with Graham. I brought it up with him too. I
nice.
remember it came up, but it's an old book. It's like over 100 years old. The guy who wrote the book, in that book, he coined the terms homeostasis and fight and flight. Those and it yeah, but homeostasis is like at rest. It's like everything is balanced in homeostasis, and your tool to me, the way I think of it, is like it's a tool to pull your body from a tension to homeostasis, and then also kind of like over time and over probably through the learning of using that tool to kind of increase your capabilities at homeostasis, if that makes
I
sense.
would really love that, man. I've been thinking about stretching and homeostasis a lot, and I really love this word lag force or this phrase lag force. I feel like that's a homeostatic response, you know, like our the lag force in our body slows us down or slows parts of it down using the stretch response, using these fascial tension lines in order to create whatever situation we need to deal with, you know, and these tools, the body lever tunes that notation because it's a neurological singing.
Yeah.
You're singing through all of these strings in your body, and you're just giving the intent out to the body of what to do, and that's orienting your bones. So if you have really good tuned strings, you're going to play a much more beautiful song in your experience. And I know that's very flowery language, but it's so true. Everything really boils back to music and resonance, and when everything's moving in unison, like I say with interrotation, the concept that things want to move in unison, whether that's opposed or with each other, we just feel better doing things that way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of like what I was talking about earlier with like the trail running and having that towel kind of at just the right amount of tension for each step so that it's like you're talking about the guitar string. It's the tension is like it's not so hard that when it tenses more it snaps. It's not so soft that it has to like go through the stretch shortening cycle to pick up that slack. It's just perfectly ready to fire and um without any energy slippage.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Prime, prime.
Um I'm one thing you mentioned that I wanted to just suggest for my side of the table is really pursuing that bone test with the body lever. I'd be fascinated to see. I'm, I'm sure is a bone test expensive? It's probably pretty penny.
I think for me as a client, if I were paying normal price, it's a couple thousand to do like a year's,
Yeah,
regimen with them or whatever. But I'm attempting to see if it's something they would incorporate into their normal run of things and just say, hey, we've got a new tool we want to try, and facilitate and see what happens. This has been really great for lots of people. Obviously, we just want to see in this environment if there is a net change without any other, significant changes. And if we were able to work with a few people, half a dozen or so, it could just show just some efficacy to it.
yeah.
The
Even
modeling I've
anecdotal.
done, yeah, it wouldn't be anecdotal anymore. The modeling I've done with it has mostly been with Chat GPT. I've had really intense, long, long conversations for 2 years or so with AI, and diving into these things. It discovered the concept for it. It said this is uniquely applying what's called bilateral shearing when you have two sticks on both sides of it and they're shearing at these types of vectors. This doesn't happen in other situations, and it's similar to grappling and wrestling. And I was like, wait a minute, every grappler you look like looks like they have bones double the density of the person next to them, so maybe there's something to this, that when you're using the body lever, you're literally like slowly grappling with yourself.
Yeah, that's honestly from a athletic perspective, that's my quest. I do jujitsu and I I did Muay Thai for a while and really try to get my tendons, ligaments and bones as strong as possible. I think that that's especially with the weight class sports. Those are kind of the highest leverage things to increase the density of.
Right.
But yeah, I would, yeah, your tool is really cool.
Working on it, bro.
Yeah,
We'll get
yeah.
there.
It's yeah, I'll think about it. I wonder if there's like a bone testing uh clinic or something that you
Well,
could collaborate with.
Merrick Health that works with Mark Bell and the Power Project.
Mhm.
I've already reached out to them, and the sales guy. I just did a little interview. He was like, "Yeah, we could put a body lever in your regiment of things." He kind of threw it back at me, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Really? That was really great." I'd love to work with you guys and get mine tested first, and see what happens. Maybe they'll onboard people and get to try it out.
Yeah.
Be a really great intervention for just about anybody. Bone density increases the amount of musculature that your frame can carry. It's a
Right.
direct proportionate relationship with that. So I think everybody could, if it works, who knows? Maybe it's a 10 or a 5% increase in your total overall muscle mass. Who knows?
Yeah. It's interesting. There's I know the number one predictor of injury risk in the knees was the height that you could fall from or like jump down from. Um, the higher you
Hmm.
could go, the lower the injury risk in the knees. And There's this one guy on Instagram. His name is. I've tried to get him on this podcast. I don't think he saw the message. He's probably a busy man, but it's DAC Performance, DAC, and he does a lot of
Okay.
like those depth jumps. You know the depth jumps.
Right, right,
Yeah, and he's pretty extreme with it. He has a, reverse hyper, like the swinging. Yeah, he'll use that with a strap, and he'll kind of do a lot of that same depth jump style training, but his whole thing is bone density, and like that, those are the exercises. I know depth jumps, which is the knee test. So basically, the better you are at depth
right,
jumps, it's a bit of an extension, but with the two facts I'm bringing up, the better are you at depth jumps, I'm concluding the less injury
right. Right.
based
But that
on it's a
spiral
set of
force going up the shin is
yeah,
like that's the whole game, you know,
yeah,
and they're starting to simulate those types of training with these balls and kicking them and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff going on right now. It's pretty wild.
yeah. It's cool to connect it, and I appreciate you going out there, spreading the good word.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been really great to be on the show. I got to get going for
Yeah.
this sprint out here in another hour. My batteries are dying. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat about everything. Should I say my handles and stuff?
Yeah, yeah. Where can people find you? If people have been interested by this conversation, I always ask where's somewhere else they can look.
Yeah, you can find me and most of my ideas on my Instagram handles. They're going to be under Body Lever and separately Steve with the sticks. And then my website is thebodylever.com. It's mostly the store and just some, recommendations, people using the tool and things of that nature. And I'm going to be expanding into some new markets, working with some apothecary skincare and things of that nature soon. So
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see how it all comes together. I'm excited to get my hands on a body lever at some point as well too. Um, Thanks, Steve, for coming on. Give Graham my best. We did episode a little while back. He's an awesome guy too, and you guys are both, as I say, spreading the good word. So thank you much.
thank you very much.
All right.
Take care.